Wow, do you believe I found this online?
Hello, my little Luxes. Welcome back to another episode of Luxy Charms, and I am your host, Tracy Lux. And today I am actually doing a deep dive, kind of talking about a recent film, and that would be the 2021 film Old by M. Night Shyamalan. So I kind of decided to talk about this one due to the fact that this one sits with me. And it's one of those films where I can't make up my mind if I like it or dislike it. But before I start disclosing more about my feelings and thoughts towards the film, let's go ahead and jump into it. And, well, first of all, spoiler alert, I am going to go very in-depth about this film, including revealing the ending. I want this to be a very strong warning that if you have not seen this film and do not like spoilers, please, this is your warning right now. Spoiler alert, I am going to talk about the ending of this one because it is very important to what I want to discuss. And also, viewer discretion is advised. Like I had stated before, this was directed and written by M. Night Shyamalan, but I should state that this is an adaptation from a graphic novel in 2010 called Sandcastle, and that was written by Pierre-Oscar Lévy and Frederik Peeters, and of course, as always, I apologize if I am mispronouncing anyone's names. It's not on purpose, I'm just terrible at pronouncing anything. You'll probably hear me slur my words several different times. It's just I have a weird speech impediment, but that's not the important part. Anyway, let's just talk about Old. I will talk about more in depth about what inspired him to take this and turn it into a film. And the rest of the cast will be in the description down below. Can you believe I found this online? Prisca says to her husband Guy, which is the reason why the Cappa family has found this beautiful and secluded resort by the name of Annemieka. Upon arriving, they are greeted by welcoming, wonderful staff, and the adults are given these special cocktails that are catered to their likes and wants. It just seems like the perfect paradise. The perfect paradise for that last hurrah, that last perfect family trip. At least that was the intentions of Prisca and Guy, because we quickly come to find out that they are having marital issues and that they are in the process of getting ready to have a separation and divorce, and they wanted to have this last vacation together with their children before they let them know that they were going to be getting divorced. And this was also going to be the last time before they would even reveal to the children that Prisca had just found out that she had a tiny tumor. So they just wanted this last happy moment with their kids before it would feel like their lives were falling apart and changing quickly. But as things usually go in a horror movie, things are just too good to be true. There's a special reason why this luxurious looking resort somehow is affordable for the Cappa family. There are reasons to have strong, distrustful feelings. Now, for the first day, the Cappa family are exploring the beaches around the resort, visiting the restaurant, and upon being at the restaurant is where they meet several other families that are staying at the resort. Trent even manages to make friends with Idlib, who is the nephew to the resort manager.
I can do a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, which is a considerable thing to do. My dad and I put clear glue on them and hang them on my wall. I collect conch shells.
And the two boys quickly bond together by going around and asking the people at the resort what were their names and what was their jobs. But that wasn't the only fun game that they played together. They came up with a secret code, a secret password, where they would send secret messages to each other. They were the only ones that could decode it and know what they were trying to tell each other secretly. But on the following day, the Cappa family is told of a secret beach that is this little private cove where they could spend the day with the family. But it was told to them that they couldn't reveal it to anybody else at the resort. But they quickly find out that there were several other families that were also invited to this private beach. So the Cappa family and a couple other families head down to this remote beach. And immediately they are stunned and wowed by the beauty of this remote cove that nobody else was at. A beach that seemed very remote and nobody else was around except for one lone person, who was a rapper by the name of Mid-Size Sedan. And the daughter Maddox of the Cappa family recognized him and was super excited to see this guy on the beach. And as much as this secret little cove seemed like the perfect little paradise, strange things start to happen pretty quickly. And the turning point pretty much starts with the son Trent finding a dead body while swimming around the cove. It is quickly revealed that this is the girlfriend to Mid-Size Sedan, and he's just as shocked and appalled as the rest of them when they find her body. But of course, what happens? People start accusing him, and of course he keeps trying to plead his innocence. But one of the other people on the beach, a doctor by the name of Charles, just keeps accusing him and saying that he had to have done it. Why else would she have passed away? So while the adults are busy arguing over the cause of death, several other strange events very quickly start happening. Jaren and Patricia happened to arrive at this same exact moment. The Cappa family had met them earlier at the resort, and they found out that Patricia suffered from severe seizures, and she had this happen at the resort in front of everybody during breakfast. Now, when they arrive, Jaren is a nurse, so of course they start making speculations. Well, with them arriving, everybody starts stating, hey, we need to call for help. There was a body found. We need to go and get the van. Well, of course, Jaren and Patricia keep trying to say, well, they already left. They immediately left after dropping us off. So with the Cappa family and that, they did the exact same thing. Dropped them off on the beach with a ton of food and went on their merry little way. Apparently that was so that they could go back and pick up Jaren and Patricia and then drop them off. So then, while all this is still going on, Agnes, who is Charles' mother, starts falling ill. And so the panic for that and trying to figure out what was wrong with her and trying to help her. And in pain, she's struggling to breathe. So they start trying to call for help. Well, absolutely none of them have reception on their cell phones, so none of them can call out. And that's probably because they're in this enclosed cove that has cliffs all around them, surrounding them on this beach. So then they try to leave through the cave where they had first entered into this private beach. And come to find out that if they tried to leave, they would literally get severely ill and black out, and they would end up back on the beach again. Basically the idea that they would stumble out backwards because they're in such severe pain they couldn't handle walking through this cave. And it happened with everyone. And no matter how hard they tried, it was as if there was this weird barrier that they just couldn't cross, and they were stuck on that beach. So panic quickly starts to take over. They can't call out for help, and they can't leave through the cave that they had first come into because everybody would black out. And things went from bad to worse. Agnes had ended up passing away. Well, then it's this time frame that the parents finally realize and notice that their children have aged and that their children are now much older. Well, I should say, Trent was the age of 6 when they walked into the cove. Now he looked like he was about the age of 10, 11. So that's how much time had gone by. So everyone's starting to panic and freak out. And since it was the children that are aging more quickly, the adults weren't realizing that it wasn't just happening to the children. Not yet, anyway. I'm jumping ahead just a little bit. But by the title of the movie, you should be able to figure out what is happening on this little private cove. It isn't until later on and they realize that the body that was on the beach had now decomposed to bones. And the mother, Prisca, worked in museums, so that was her job, was to study bones and everything. And she explained that it would take several years, up to 7 years, for a body to decompose the way that it had, and it had only been a few hours. So then this is when it starts dawning on everybody that everything on this beach was aging rapidly. And it wasn't just happening to the children. Of course, now the children were getting to the point where they were teenagers. And so everybody else obviously is going into panic mode. And not only have we lost Agnes, now the dog that was brought with the family, because it was Agnes's dog, that poor dog had passed away from old age. So they start calculating time, trying to figure out how much time passes while they are in that remote beach. And they figured out that 1 minute would equal 10 days, which meant that 1 day spent on that beach equaled 50 years. And that technically they would go through an entire lifetime in 1 day on that beach. Obviously, it sends all of them over the edge, as any person would do, would start panicking and trying to figure out how to get out of there, but it just keeps progressing. But not only with the aging process, but it also was advancing their illnesses as well. Prisca, who had the tumor in her stomach, they discovered that her tumor is rapidly growing. So they have to go through the process of removing this tumor from her. Well, cutting into the body, it instantly heals because the idea of how much time is progressing so much faster. So they have to go through this weird process of figuring out how to remove this tumor from her body. Of course, find out that everybody else has some kind of weird illness or something going on. We already know that Patricia had the seizures, but oddly enough, she hasn't had a single seizure while they were here on this island. And they even kind of comment on that, kind of brush over it, where she says maybe it has something to do with the strangeness of this island, the strangeness of this beach. But Charles, who was the doctor, you come to find out that he had schizophrenia. And while he was there in that secluded area and aging, it was getting worse and worse. So in his sickness, he starts attacking other people. He starts getting paranoid and forgetting things from bad to worse. Now it was from worse to worse. Now, the strangest part about this film is the relationship between Kara and Trent. Because when they are teenagers, for some odd reason, these two, in a decision, while they are secluded in a tent where nobody else is paying attention to them, they decide to sleep together. In the act of them sleeping together, they end up pregnant. And within moments of Kara and Trent leaving the tent, Kara realizes she is famished, she is starving, and they begin walking towards the parents. And immediately everyone starts noticing that her stomach is rapidly growing. And the nurse, Jared, flat out says, if I would have seen her walk into the ER, I would have put my money on the fact that she was 5 months pregnant. And within minutes, she goes from being fully to term and giving birth to a baby. And then the other weird thing was that as soon as the baby was born, they set the baby down to clean it up, because, you know, after being born, it needs to be cleaned up. And within seconds of laying the child down, it passes away. And the determination of it died from lack of attention. So basically, this baby died of dehydration. Because remember, 1 minute equals 10 days. So this child had a lack of nutrients. Now that's where it starts going into my head, where I start asking all these questions, the things that make my head go round and round with this movie, which is going to go into terms of my difficult feelings of, do I like this movie? Do I not like this movie? It starts here with these questions, and obviously it's a magical, supernatural, unnatural beach, cove, that this thing that's happening and how it's affecting everyone. But with the baby's death, what it equivalents to is that shouldn't technically every second that these people are on this beach, shouldn't they be eating food constantly? Or within a minute, wouldn't they die of dehydration? Or wouldn't they starve to death? I know the human body can last quite a bit of time without food, but I still feel like they would always be hungry, that they would always be thirsty. So that's kind of the first aha moment. But the other weird part is the fact that these two who were 6-year-old children, because both Kara and Trent were both 6 when they came on the beach, and just because they became teenagers, their first thought process as teens is not going to be, hey, let's experiment and let's sleep together. It's very odd. It's not normal. It's not normal. One of those things where it's like, okay, I guess you have to brush past it because they're just trying to show the extreme, have that spectacle of the horror of that moment. That they wanted that moment of having to show how fast a pregnancy happened. So I get that's where they were going with it. So at that point, it's like, okay, I guess I have to let that go and let those questions fester to get to the conclusion a lot faster than me going through and describing everything that happens throughout their time in this cove, is the fact that within a day of being there, it's been 50 years. It's been a lifetime. And since everybody either in a panic, trying to escape, more of them have accidents, have passed away, others are passing away from their diseases that they have because they've progressed, and others just have died of old age. And that's ultimately what ends up happening with Prisca and Guy, is that they die of old age. And the sweet sentimental part of the film is the fact that through that day and all of them aging together and these two essentially growing old together, that they both come to realize that they still loved each other, like greatly loved each other, and that had forgotten what they were even fighting about, and that in the end it didn't matter and that they were together. That was a sweet sentimental piece to it, where they both came to terms with what ended up happening, but they were at peace and they were together still. So now everybody else who has been on this beach has passed away except for 2 people, and that is Maddox and Trent, who are the 2 kids from the Cappa family. And at this time, they're around their 50s, 60s, but they keep trying to figure out ways that they could possibly leave this island. And Trent all of a sudden starts talking about his friendship with the boy at the resort, and knowing that his uncle was the manager to the resort. And then he remembers that Idlib had left him another secret code, and he hadn't decoded it yet. So Maddox kind of talking to him and saying, because in that moment they had kind of decided to build a sandcastle before they would continue trying to figure out another way to get off this terrible, horrible cove. So while they are sitting there making the sandcastles, when Trent has that aha moment of, hey, I remembered that my friend at the resort had left me another message. So he goes and decodes this message, and he essentially warns him that his uncle doesn't like the coral. So Trent and Maddox kind of come to a realization that maybe they can escape this place by leaving through the coral, which is one of those things where it's like, oh, you know, if Trent, when they first got there, decided to get out this secret message from his friend and decode it then, maybe he'd be able to pass the message along to everybody else, and everybody else could have tried escaping as well. But neither here nor there. But, you know, it's a movie and it's a horror movie. People have to die. In fact, the body count for this, including with the dog, is 12. So there are 12 kills or deaths in this film. But anyway, so the two go and barely escape through the coral. Of course, you gotta go through that big extreme moment where you're afraid if they're not gonna make it. Did they drown? Did they make it? We don't know. But you are watching this scene happening because of the fact that the person who had brought them on the van was watching them the entire time. And he heads back to the resort after it's been confirmed that the two were dead and that everybody from this trial, for trial 73, was now gone. So of course then you start thinking, well, what do you mean by trial? Well, here what it is that the resort is a complete front. And you're kind of even secretly introduced to the idea at the beginning because of the fact that Guy notices that Warren & Warren is a big contributor to this resort. And what it is that Warren & Warren had discovered this secret beach, this cove, and had decided that they would now do medical trials on different subjects, and that they had the chance to study people within a day instead of a lifetime, to do these trials and errors with their medical supplies and drugs to see what would work and what didn't work. You come to find out earlier in the film as well that it's the resort that reaches out to these people, and that's actually how Prisca first found out about the resort, is because she had won this sweepstakes type of idea and she had looked it up online, and once she had the full information and had reached out to them, they had essentially paid for everything. They even took care of everything. They took care of the plane tickets, the arrival, so everybody started figuring out that this place could essentially just make them all disappear and make it seem like this resort had nothing to do with it. And those special cocktails that they gave them all at the beginning were drinks that had these special medical drugs in them. And that's where this all ties together, is that they bring in all these people with their different ailments, their different illnesses, and it didn't matter if it was mental or physical. They brought them in and tested them with these drugs. And then that is where the drinks come in. And they immediately take them to this remote cove, and within a day, watch them and see what happens. And their most proud moment was of Patricia, because she didn't have a seizure for a certain amount of time, and they had claimed that it was a cure because the equivalent time that she had not had one was equal to 16 years. It's in those final moments that you find out that Trent and Maddox had made it through the coral, had made it through and gotten back to the resort, and that they were alive, and they were finally there to reveal what this place had done to their parents and had done to everybody else before them. And that they had this notebook that had names and addresses of people who had also been on the beach before them. And because of the game that the boys played at the beginning of asking names and occupations, he knew a man that was there at the resort that was a cop, and he gave him this notebook and gave him the information. So it's the big expose of making sure that this place goes down. So it ends with that happy moment of the two children, now 60-year-old adults, being taken care of, and that this resort was going to be closed down and hopefully prosecuted for all the hundreds and hundreds of people that they have probably killed before then. Because like I said, this was trial 73. So that's how many times they had done this before this had happened to the Cappa family. So there's a semi-happy ending to this whole entire thing, and I say semi-happy because I mean, obviously, how would you feel going from 6 years old to 60 years old? You literally would have your life taken away from you. So anyway, let's go more into depth about my other feelings towards this film that I just get stuck on.
Oh no! Oh no!
We never leave each other. Nothing separates us.
Now, this movie review is probably going to be much longer than some of my other ones, because the other ones I haven't gone so in depth about talking about them, like just talking about the films, what I think of them, going a little in depth about stuff. But like I said, this one sits with me, and it sits with me weirdly, because there are just too many questions, too many hows. Like I had mentioned before with the baby and the fact that laying it down on the ground to clean it and it being not touched for a minute resulted in its death because they said it lack of attention, the idea that it died of dehydration, lack of human touch, human contact. So then that brings up the question of food. Shouldn't people be starving the whole time? Shouldn't they want water the whole time? And it also brings you to the food and the element that things on this island are all aging. So it just so happens the food that is sent with them are supposedly in special packages so that the food doesn't rot, so that it doesn't age like everything else, that it's supposed to be processed in a way so that it's safe from the cove and the conditions of it. But this food isn't like you would think like an MRE or anything like that, where it would be like canned food, where it would be safe from that type of contamination, from rotting and that kind of thing. This was like substantial food, because at one point when Tara's putting a mouthful of food into her mouth, it's pasta salad, and that I would think would still deteriorate. So I don't know if it was supposed to be the idea and the concept that the bags that these things were in somehow just made it so that they were anti-aging. I don't know. It's super weird. Too many things just are left in the air of how does this work if everything else is aging. One of the other things they bring up is talking about hair and nails, where they're like everything else is aging, but their hair and their nails weren't growing like crazy. So they come up with the concept and the idea that, well, they're dead cells, so they don't age like everything else. So then that turns into, okay, but dead cells, so shouldn't they be decomposing or something? That's where that gets weird, because the body that they find, and technically all the bodies end up going through this process of the decomposing. So if the dead bodies decompose, and they decompose quickly, then the hair and the nails still should have been growing. It's dead cells that still come from the living body, so the process would still be happening. So there should have been something more with that, with the nails and the hair. It just was kind of the idea of them brushing past it so that they didn't have to add that as another element to the film, I'm assuming. Unless it's a part of the graphic novel as well. Like I said, this is based off of Sandcastle. I'm interested to read that, to see the differences between the graphic novel and from the film. So I think that'd be an interesting concept to see. Another thing was the element that objects that were left on the beach were aging and deteriorating as well, which included the silverware that was found on the beach, because the kids find a pile of old stuff.
Whoa. Who would leave this?
From the hotel! They're so rusted! What's happening?
Found stuff from the hotel in the sand.
And there's rusty silverware, which means that because of the rust, that means that things are aging. And I don't know if this is supposed to be the idea, because I believe rust happens because of bacteria. And bacteria would be a living thing, so I don't know if that's supposed to have to do with it. So that just leaves more questions where it's like, okay, so if hair and nails don't grow because they're dead cells, but the dead bodies decompose quickly, and then you have rust happening on the silverware. So it's a lot of back and forth, which just makes my brain go, well, if this happens, why doesn't this happen? And it just keeps going in this circle the whole entire time. And like I said, the other one was the teens, the fact that the first time that these two are by themselves, their decision is to sleep together. And yes, teens will be motivated by horniness and stuff like that, but that's not how it works. It's not going to instantly happen. And their minds, yes, their minds would be aging, but they would still only have the memories of from 1 to 6. So, but like I said, I understand that probably was the whole idea and the concept of having the shock value of how fast this pregnancy happens. To literally, the idea is supposed to be within 20 minutes, she's supposed to come to term. Now, while you're watching the movie, you're not seeing it happening in 20 minutes. So it seems like it's happening very quickly, and it's very traumatic at that point in time. So that one still is just one of those odd things of, okay, I just have to let that go and realize it was just used as a tactic to have the shock value of the pregnancy. Now, the biggest thing that is my question is, how was this beach discovered? How was this cove found? Because the whole thought and idea is that if you go into this place, you can't leave. You are basically going to survive for 1 day if you end up in this cove. So there's something that I'm going to read from my notes, because I took it word for word, line from line, from the resort manager, where he had said, "Nature made that beach exist for a reason. Warren and Warren was meant to find it on their research expedition. We were meant to test medicines in 1 day instead of a lifetime."
Submerged beneath the ocean for millions of years, deposited with special minerals, are causing our cells to age at a rapid rate.
This is the only explanation given for it. And the whole thought process is still, how was it discovered? And the fact of what it was there some kind of scientific tools used to find it? And if somebody did find it, how did they leave to tell others? Because if you enter into the place, you are going to pass away. The only other thing is the concept and idea, because of the fact that the resort manager knew about the coral, knew that you could escape from the coral, but they semi-explain that as well by saying that the year prior to the Cappa family, there was a man who had escaped from the coral, but he had unfortunately drowned in the ocean. So he still didn't expose the resort because of that. But once again, these are still those questions of how was it discovered? They're saying that Warren and Warren had found it in a research expedition, but who found it, and how were they able to tell others if they went into this cove and couldn't leave? That's just, I wanted just a little bit more of an element put into it. They explain it very minutely, that Warren and Warren finds it, they decide they're going to use it for their medical research, so that instead of having a lifetime of trying to study subjects, they could do it in a day. And that's the whole idea and the concept of it. And that we're supposed to know that Warren and Warren are monsters, because in their minds they're doing it for the good of others, and that in their research and their studies they have already helped hundreds and hundreds of people, and thousands of people, and that someday it would be in the millions and billions of how they were going to be helping and saving people. But it still is that concept of they are so heartless that these families are going onto this beach, including their innocent children, and these people have no heart or soul. because in their minds they're thinking it's for the greater good. And I don't care who you are, that's in that kind of concept, you're still a monster and you're not a good person. They were doing it about the money, and we know it was about the money. Like I said, I shouldn't have to think so in depth about this film. Just think about it in entertainment value and the fact that, you know, they semi-give you ideas of how this thing was discovered. It's the biggest thing that just sits with me on it. It's just going to be that thing that keeps running in my mind over and over again of how was this place discovered without whoever discovered it not dying of old age. But anyway, I'm thinking that the fact that the focus of this film and what it should be looking at is the whole idea of what comes from M. Night Shyamalan himself. And once again, I'm going to take this from my notes because this was a trivia fact that was on IMDb. And of course, it gives more of the detail of the fact that he had taken this from the graphic novel Sandcastle. When asked what inspired him to adapt the book to film, director M. Night Shyamalan explained, "The book gave me the opportunity to work through a lot of anxieties I had around death and aging, and things like my parents getting older." So, it's important things like that is what the focus of the film is to be on. And it makes sense, especially if you think of the characters Prisca and Guy, and if you focus on their story. The fact that they come to terms very quickly about the fact that they are only going to live for one day, but in the end, in that lifetime, they realize that they still love each other, and they're still happy to be with one another. And that's a beautiful moment in the fact that their aging process goes from total panic and horror to, at the final moments, they're at peace. They're together. So the deeper meaning and point to this film is dealing with the aging process, dealing with family matters, and what is more important to you in those final moments. And also kind of exposing the shittiness of the medical field and the fact that, you know, they care about money, they don't care about people, because if they truly cared, why were they sending these families with their children onto this island? It's pretty horrific. If they think in their head, oh, well, they're not really dying from anything horrible, they're dying from old age, but unnaturally and not by their choice, so... But anyway, yes, that is why I wanted to talk about this film, and one of those where I really want to know your thoughts and opinions on this as well. This still sits with me weirdly. It's one of those films where it's like, do I like it? Do I dislike it? In the moment after I'm done watching it, I don't, but then it sits with me with all these questions, and then I think about the inner points to it, and the beautiful love story between Prisca and Guy, and that really is the meat and potatoes to the film. So there's moments that are so good for the film and everything, but then there's the hows and the what if questions that loop in my head and I get stuck on, and that sends me down that rabbit hole of, okay, now I gotta think of every other possibility and do the red string theory and all that kind of crap. I don't know. I really need to know your thoughts and opinions on this one as well. Maybe I should just look at this one as just an entertainment film, to be watching it for entertainment value. It's supernatural. It's not supposed to make sense. Does it technically need to make sense? It's one of those, if it was like supernatural alien reasons, then maybe it would be something that could sit better in my mind, but this one was supposed to happen in nature in some phenomenal way. I don't know. I can't make up my mind about this one. Maybe this one is just that in between where I don't like it, I don't dislike it, I don't hate it. I definitely don't hate it, and I don't love it. So maybe this one is just one of those in-between films where I can watch it several times, especially for the fact of trying to answer the many questions in my head, but it's not one of those where I have to seek it out type of thing. So, but please let me know your thoughts and opinions and what do you think of this film, and thank you so much for joining me here on another Luxy Charms. And if you're brand new here, welcome, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you are returning, please make sure that you are still subscribed. I guess YouTube's doing its weird thing again, and people are randomly being removed from my page. I don't know why it does that. Every time I upload a video, I notice that it happens. So, whatever. Anyway, but thank you once again, and if you would like to follow me on my other social medias, there will be a link in the description down below, including a link to my Etsy shop where I sell my art, and a link to my Patreon, which if you come and join my Patreon, it greatly helps me, and I will have a shout out on the screen right now to my fellow Patreon members. So thank you so much for joining me on there. And a special shout out to my ultimate, well, I only have one right now, so to my ultimate Lux, thank you so much, Kurt. And I appreciate everybody that comes and joins me here. And remember that I'm the afterlife of the party, but I would love for you to join me in the afterlife of the party. And always remember to slay, subscribe, like, and always be yourself. Until next time, my little Luxes, I hope you have a Luxy Charms kind of day. Bye!